As you know, we're spending 5 weeks considering the 5 stages of the grief cycle. So far, we've thought about shock, anger, and guilt. Today, our topic is probably the most debilitating and lingering of anything thus far. Today, I want to think with you briefly about the depression we all feel when we say goodbyes we didn't want to say. If you've lost a loved one, you know what it feels like. It feels like emptiness. It feels like loneliness. It feels like life is no longer natural, or sometimes, for example, when a child loses a parent, no longer safe. It feels like the rest of the world is insensitive somehow. To be sure, in the first few days or even the first few weeks following your loss, people came around. They were kind and caring and compassionate. But now, they're all back in their lives, busy and laughing as if the world were no different than it's ever been. But for you, it's profoundly different. There's a hole in your world, shaped just like the person who died. And like the pieces of a puzzle, no one else, no other piece, can adequately fill that space. How can others not notice how empty, how lonely, and how different the world has become? Often people tell us that the feelings of depression are worse at night. Why is that? Well, there are 2 reasons. First, at night you are more likely to be fatigued. Whatever things you do, from your job to taking care of your home, are done during the day. At night, when you're tired from that, depression gets a foothold. Because wherever our bodies go, our emotions go with them. If we are weary in the flesh, we are vulnerable in the spirit. And second, as noted, during the day we tend to be busier. Other things crowd out the immediacy of our sorrow. But at night, life slows down, and we have time to remember and reflect. The faces and voices of our lost loved ones appear in our dreams. We open a closet and spot an item that they gave to us or that they wore, and suddenly all the pain returns again. Those, for the most part, are nighttime experiences, which make things a little more difficult when darkness falls. Depression, not clinical, but emotional in the ways I've just described it, is an unavoidable component of grief. So, what's the good news, or is there any? Fortunately, there is, and it comes at 2 points. First of all, the cycle of grief, depression being the longest part, is finite. A dear friend of many years, a brilliant therapist named Dr. Gary Brown, answered a question of mine once in the following way. I asked him, how long does it take to process grief without counseling, as opposed to how long it takes if you go to a therapist? He answered, if you struggle through it on your own, it will take a year to process the pain. However, if you go to a good counselor, it will only take 12 months. What was he saying? He was saying that we are wired in such fashion that there is no quick fix for grief. There are cycles and seasons and anniversaries and occasions we simply have to go through. King David did not say, yea, though I go around the valley of the shadow of death, but rather, yea, though I go through the valley of the shadow of death. Now, obviously, a good counselor can make that journey more bearable, but we are wired to take a full year to process the pain. To be sure, after 3 months, it will be better than it was initially, and after 6, better than it was after 3, but there are no shortcuts. The second word of good news is that in time, and leaning on the one who walks with us, we do arrive at resolution, a place called new normal. We'll think about that together next week. For now, consider these 2 questions. First, what does missing someone tell you about your own spirit and your capacity for loving and for relationships? Second, Think about or discuss the phrase from Tennyson and the poem he wrote in the midst of grief. "'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all." Is that true for you? If so, why? If not, why not? I'll see you next week.